How we doing, everybody? It's Wardy here, and as you guys can see, we're yet again breaking down all the latest news and rumblings in Mets land. This time a December 16th edition at the time this video first dropping. Thank you so much to everyone that checked out yesterday's breakdown, as the Mets appear to be a finalist for Kyle Tucker, as well as our live stream that we did last night at the time of this video dropping. So make sure to check out that respective content after watching this video in case you guys are not caught up already, because today, folks, we're here to break down how, as a surprise to absolutely nobody, the New York Mets are still heavily pursuing and targeting one Cody Bellinger. There's been a lot of contradiction that's happened in the media since the start of the offseason, but one thing that's been consistent: the Mets have always had their interest in Cody Bellinger. That has continued, and now it may be rearing its head to the point that we could find ourselves a decision, hopefully, God willing, sooner rather than later. So we'll break down ultimately where these reports stem from, why the Mets view so highly of Cody Bellinger, contrary to the belief that some of you Mets fans out there asking me, Wardy, why is Cody Bellinger a logical fit for this team? I just don't see it. I'm concerned about the home road splits, whatever it is. We're going to break all that down extensively. We'll get into the pros and the cons between himself and Kyle Tucker, as we know the Mets are continuing to be in the market of. Which one is more likely, unlikely to happen, those kind of things. And from there, we'll talk not only on guys like Bellinger and Tucker, we'll also get into Alex Bregman, as he may very well be the most logical fallback option for the New York Mets in a world where they do not bring either of these position players in. Is there a possibility that the Mets land both? Anything's possible, but I'm not going to get my hopes up until we see pen and paper it's happened, the same way that most of you Mets fans, I'm sure, could find yourself agreeing. We'll break down a bit on Bregman, his game, where that reporting stems from, and we'll also get into, to begin today's show, the latest details regarding Edwin Diaz's departure that has come to light, which has given us some more clarity as to where maybe the Mets were at fault, where Diaz was at fault, and we can finally put this to bed, because it feels like I've been beating this dead horse for the past week plus. Sit back, relax, and get yourself ready for the ride, which is our latest breakdown here on WardyNYM. All I ask is that you guys hit that like and subscribe on your way, and let me know your initial thoughts, reactions, and analysis to everything that we're going to break down in this one. And as always, shout out to our amazing sponsor there at SeatGeek that has you covered for all of your ticketing needs. Whether you need NBA tickets, NHL tickets, of course, comedy shows, concert shows, anything in the ticketing space, our awesome friends there at SeatGeek have you covered. Just use my promo code, that is WARDY10, for 10% off your next ticket purchase. Link down below in the description, and shout out to SeatGeek for being the #1 rated ticketing app in the game today. Now, folks, let's deviate away from the Belly highlights. We'll come back to him because we got a lot to say on that front. But let's begin today's discussion with the Edwin Diaz reporting, because as many of you guys have seen, and we're going to reiterate the following, this was from Jorge Castillo of ESPN this morning, stating the following: it's been a week since Edwin Diaz chose to sign with the Dodgers over the Mets. Some details on the Mets' pursuit of the closer and what's possibly next for a team that is going to look different in 2026. Now, let me make clear, what I'm about to break down is some new information, as well as pairing that information with what we know publicly to this point. If anything, is a contradiction from one to the other. And we're also going to listen to remarks from Edwin Diaz himself when speaking to the media over the past 24 to 48 hours, giving us more clarity on his decision outside of the obvious that he wanted to be in LA. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at this piece, because in this article, everybody, we're going to highlight a couple specific things, but you guys can see some of the details there with me. And I would like to start off with something I think is very, very notable, okay? Diaz had already received 2 contract offers, one of 3 years from the LA Dodgers and another of 5 years from the Atlanta Braves. So, you know, when we saw reporting over the past week which stated that Diaz turned down longer-term offers from other teams because he, again, wanted to be in LA? Well, the Atlanta Braves were that team. Could you just take a moment to think, oh my God, the Mets could have lost Edwin Diaz to the Braves? Because think about it. The Mets didn't go 5 years for Diaz. Maybe they would have went farther closer in that category, but they did not technically go to 5. The Braves went to 5. Now, that AAV is uncertain, but what is certain is that they were going to pony up some big dollars to potentially land Sugar, the Mets' former star closer. Thankfully, while I'm not happy to see Edwin land in LA, that bothers me a lot, I am grateful that he's not staying in the National League East with our arch rivals, because if you want to talk about a bad look for the fan base, for David Stearns and everyone else in co, it's one thing to lose Edwin Diaz and Pete Alonso. It's another if you lose a guy like that in Diaz's caliber to the Atlanta Braves in your division, who you're going to have to face constantly. Now, I understand it's slim pickings between picking the Braves and the Dodgers as to which one is a lesser of evil for you as a Mets fan, but still, knowing that the Braves threw out a 5-year deal, one, they're schmucks. How dare they? How dare they go after the best reliever in baseball, right? Well, I will just say this much. They settled with Robert Suarez in a way that the Mets most certainly didn't. So, the Mets cannot pull off a trade for a Mason Miller from the Padres that we have highlighted plenty in last night's live show and our video breakdown a couple of days ago when a reporting first came out that the Mets are in the Padres market. They can do something along those lines. It is very slim pickings as to what is currently available out there, both the free agent and trade market. But as we continue, the offer came on December 7th there. As we saw, Edwin Diaz was still waiting for the Mets and what he was going to be willing, what they were willing to offer, that being David Stearns and Steve Cohen. As we see the following, though, Diaz, though, miffed by the Mets after not alerting him before signing free agent reliever Devin Williams, which, again, I understand that Jeff Passan is the first that stated this over this past week, that supposedly Edwin Diaz was not happy with that decision of the Mets not informing about the Williams signing ahead of time. I'm calling bull then, and I'm calling bull now. I don't care. That's been reaffirmed from someone else in ESPN here. Makes sense because they're coworkers. I think it's absolute nonsense that the Mets signing Devin Williams ahead of time was at all a wrinkle or a factor into Edwin Diaz's decision-making. If it was, shame on him for not doing his simple homework of paying attention, at least a sliver, into the market outside of himself, because it was widely reported from the beginning of the offseason the Mets really liked Devin Williams and that they were mulling the idea of signing Williams and Edwin Diaz at the same time. Devin Williams, once more, was on record the day he was officially signed with the New York Mets that he was down and he was willing to be the setup man for Diaz. That was in part as to why he signed here, outside of course, getting a really nice contract that was probably better than most teams, even though the Mets were in the realm of what other clubs offered, and Williams said no to those clubs and decided to land in Flushing, Queens, there to join the crosstown rival of the Yankees. But as we continue, the initial offer from the Mets was on December 7th of 3 years, $66 million, with $21 million deferred over 10 years. Negotiations continued from there, and the Mets ultimately produced another offer, adding a $9 million signing bonus to match the Dodgers with a $21 million deferred over 15 years. But Diaz, who turns 32 in March, wanted at minimum an average annual value of $20 million after deferrals were taken into account and less deferred money spread over a shorter period. So he wanted a very specific payout structure in ways that the Mets were not willing to supposedly accommodate. They refused to meet those terms. The Braves, though, offering more years, also declined to meet the criteria. As we continue on, that left the Dodgers, the two-time defending World Series champions, with a nudge from Diaz's Puerto Rican friend, Kike Hernandez, to make an improved third offer. 3 years, $69 million with $9 million bonus, $13.5 million in deferred money over the years, and a conditional $6.5 million option for 2029 that would trigger if he spends a certain number of days on the injured list. Diaz accepted, giving the Dodgers another all-star into their fold after the Mets were not able to land him. But I would just like to make something abundantly clear when I take a look at these details and reiterate them to each and every one of you. The Mets still had an appetite, and we're trying to circle back. What happened here was that Diaz was approached by the Mets. He gave his demands. They said, okay, we need to negotiate this and get back to you on it. And he then approached the Dodgers with his demands. The Dodgers said yes. So instead of going back to the Mets, where he certainly could have, because the Mets were negotiating themselves and trying to figure out if this is something that they were willing to do or something closer to be doing, they didn't even get the end of an opportunity to do so because Diaz already made his decision. Diaz decided not to circle back to the Mets once he got the exact money he was looking for from LA. So of course money was a factor in this. However, the suggestion that a couple more $1 million was a differentiator in Edwin Diaz going the Dodgers over the Mets, I find to be absolutely hilarious, okay? The obvious selling point here is that Edwin obviously wanted to be an LA Dodger, and as soon as he met the contract demands that he was comfortable with from a team like LA in particular that showed their ability to prioritize him, that is all that he wanted in the end. So you could definitely argue and make this say that, oh, David Stearns got a little too cute in these negotiations where Friedman was more proactive, where the Mets, instead of maybe wanting to have further negotiations, could have just said, okay, Edwin, we'll give you what you're looking for, because what you're looking for is not a long-term deal as it is 3 years right in the sweet spot of what we wanted, but at an AAV that, we weren't as palatable for, but maybe we have more of an appetite for it now. So for good or wrong reason, and you could rightfully argue wrong, the Mets did not go down that route. And Edwin Diaz, for his own reason, decided not to circle back. So I think both things are true in this. One, the Mets missed the mark in their negotiation. It is clear as day after these further reports come out, and I will preface this by saying that Friedman did laps around David Stearns in negotiating. An absolute laps around him. And Stearns has himself to blame in that regard. You can absolutely say that. Because at the end of the day, Edwin Diaz losing him at 3 years over this kind of difference is a joke. But what's also a joke is to believe that Edwin Diaz didn't have at all a preference to want to go to LA when he most certainly did. And there's a great belief still that even if the Mets met the exact demands of what the Dodgers were offering, that it still likely wouldn't have been enough. You want to know why? And this goes back to what I've been saying on the platform verbatim for days on end now. If you're the New York Mets, and if you approach a top player in the free agent market the same way that the Dodgers and the Blue Jays do, never expect to land that player. You have to separate yourself significantly. If you have the reigning back-to-back champs going after a top talent while giving him a contract that he's very comfortable with, you need to get out of that comfort zone. You need to make it such an uncomfortable thing that you do at minimum go 4 and or 5 years of an AAV that he's looking for. That is how you separate yourself. The way that the Mets separated themselves for Juan Soto, listen, it was a lot to do with the fact that that contract had a total worth of $800 million. No other team gave that same total worth of a contract. Yes, the family hospitality was a factor for sure, but was it really the X factor? And so his decision-making, no. It was by the great sell job from Steve Cohen, David Stearns, and north of $800 million in a deal, which can get to $800 million if the Mets opt in to an additional $4 million AAV for the remaining decade of the contract Soto has, as we see after his first 5 years. So if he goes from $51 million to $55 million for the remaining decade that the Mets can opt in, then Soto has no opt-outs, and then he'll be opted in for a full worth of $800 million contract, as crazy as that is to say. So again, both sides of the coin are true. Did the Mets miss the mark in their negotiating process with Edwin Diaz? More than likely. I think that they got too cute with it, and by the time that they realized that, oh no, we were getting too cute, we actually are willing to go above and beyond what we were initially saying, it was too little too late. And for Edwin Diaz and for the Dodgers, again, Edwin was clearly going to be going to the Dodgers for the most part, as long as no team blew that contract offer out of the water. The Braves gave 5 years, but did not meet the demands on AAV he was looking for, and the Mets were right around the same realm of a contract offer the Dodgers had. So for Diaz, do you want to go to the Braves, the Mets, or the reigning back-to-back champs? It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out why Edwin Diaz wants to be an LA Dodger. But furthermore, on this topic, and the final thing that we're going to shed light on this is from Edwin Diaz himself. This was him speaking to the media over the past day or two. We're going to hear his remarks, and then I'm going to break down what the translation was as well for each and every one of you. So listen up. Just give me 1 second, everybody. I'm just making sure that the audio is exactly how it's supposed to be, because of course it wasn't. So I'm just flipping on, changing the audio setting right now. Apologies for the delay. Let's go here. Let's go over here. Okay, here we go.
Según reportes, lo que se está diciendo es que ellos no tuvieron oportunidad de aumentar la oferta de 200 como tal que con los Mets.
Nosotros le llevamos la oferta primero a los Mets y pues estaban diciendo que tenían un gas para negociar, se la llevamos también a los Dodgers, ellos aceptaron de una. Pues al aceptar de una, pues no podía regresar a los Mets y decirle que esto es lo que me está ofreciendo los Dodgers, y cuando me dijeron que sí, pues decidimos firmar con ellos. Pero
según reportes, lo que se está diciendo es que ellos...
So for those who don't know what Edwin said, this is what he stated the following. Shout out Master Flip again for the translation here. Okay, Edwin Diaz on why the Mets didn't get a shot to match the Dodgers deal. We took an offer to the Mets, and they said they have a gap to negotiate. We took it to the Dodgers, and they accepted it right away. And given they accepted it right away, I couldn't go back to the Mets and tell them this is what the Dodgers are offering me. When the Dodgers said yes, I decided to sign with them. So, one, I understand Diaz's perspective a little bit more behind, it's not great practice in negotiations to circle them back with the team if you aren't for certain going to be landing with them on saying, okay, this is what the Dodgers gave me. Can you do this too? But I also understand the other wrinkle in this, which is that if Diaz really wanted to return the New York Mets, he would have circled back to the Mets and he would have said, hey, this is what the Dodgers are offering. If you can match this, then I'm yours. There's a reason why he didn't do that, and the simple reason is he preferred to be an LA Dodger. That's why he was okay to accept that contract, and that's why he made the decision to move forward with them. When we think of the Yoshinobu Yamamoto sweepstakes all those years ago for the Mets, which really wasn't all that long ago, again, they offered $325, 10 years, and that was that. Yamamoto took that payout structure, had the Dodgers match it, and I believe the lone difference was that the Dodgers are able to put in a opt-out after, I believe, the 5th or 6th season, which is something they typically don't do. The Mets were willing to go there as well, but the Mets were essentially just used as leverage, as Yamamoto always wanted to be a Dodger. And you could argue that the Mets, to a degree, were used as leverage in this sense as well, because again, if Edwin Diaz really wanted to return to the New York Mets, he would have went back to the Mets, because he would have accepted what was still at the time a record-breaking contract of average annual value. That's what he got from the Dodgers. The Mets basically gave the exact same thing. The payout structure was just slightly different, and he wanted a certain payout structure that the Dodgers were willing to do, and knowing it's LA, what else does need to be said on that front? So with that being said, you guys can let me know how much you hate how the Mets went about this. You can tell me how much you despise Edwin Diaz or anything else in between, the comments down below. But I'm officially putting the Edwin Diaz talk to bed unless we have to have a further discussion on it, which I really hope is not the case, because I'm tired of talking about a guy who's more than likely never going to be in New York Met again, at least as of now. But let's get into the news regarding Cody Bellinger, Kyle Tucker, and Alex Bregman. This is all courtesy of Mark Feinsand of MLB on MLB Network today. So let's listen up, everybody, and break it down.
You've identified 5 dominoes, in your words, that need to fall in order for the rest of the market to come together.
Similar to what happened at the meetings. We said Schwarber was the first domino that had to fall. That would get Alonso going. I think Kyle Tucker's the first domino now that needs to fall. Tucker has a big market. The Blue Jays are very into him. He visited with them. There are other teams, the Yankees, the Mets, the Dodgers, who are also looking at Kyle Tucker. But I think when Tucker signs, and I don't know that he's going to be the first, but if he is, that will automatically make Cody Bellinger the next most important guy, because for the teams that aren't going to get Kyle Tucker, Bellinger's right on deck. So let's assume that Tucker goes to the Blue Jays. Well, I think the Yankees have to go get Cody Bellinger, get him re-signed. He was such a good fit there.
Now, how's the puppeteer handling all this, being Scott Boras? Because he's got everybody.
Well, he doesn't have Tucker.
He doesn't have Tucker?
No.
Oh, I thought he had Tucker, too.
Nope.
Excuse me.
He's got Bellinger, and he's got the next guy on my list, which is Alex Bregman. So the Mets are very in on Bellinger. Let's assume Bellinger returns to the Yankees. Well, the Mets still have some work to do. I don't know if you heard, they lost a couple of their players already.
Yes, a few.
And I think Bregman makes sense. You can move Mark Vantos over to first base, or Brett Beatty. You've got some guys you can move around. Bregman is a guy, fits in the middle of that lineup. Big player, big postseason player, and I think the kind of name the Mets could bring in.
Anyway, they get both, Bellinger and Bregman.
I mean, I never say never, but I would say that's probably unlikely. When Bregman goes, who's the best infielder left at that point? Bo Bichette. Now, the Red Sox would be losing Bregman. I could see Bo Bichette winding up in Boston, right? They've got some infielders they can move around there. Bichette. The only thing I don't see is Toronto getting Tucker and Bichette. Now, if Tucker goes somewhere else, then maybe Bichette returns to Toronto. But that's why these dominoes are all sort of interlocking, and they all play off each other. Then if Bregman and Bichette are gone, right, the Cubs are a team that's been in on a lot of these guys. I see Munetaka Murakami, the big slugger from Japan, potentially going to the Cubs. Here's the interesting thing. We're talking about dominoes. This is my number 5 guy. He's got to sign in the next 6 days. His posting window ends on December 22nd.
Wow.
So he could be the first guy to go, but the Cubs may be looking at some of the other guys, thinking their price ranges are a little out of their comfort zone. Murakami might be a better fit there to bring in some power.
All right, guys, so a lot of juicy nuggets there from Mark Feinstein of MLB. Shout out to him. That was a nice little segment that they did there on MLB Network. And now to expand on this a bit more, let's go ahead and let's start with what he mentioned in Cody Bellinger. Because, again, he said the Mets are very in on Bellinger. This isn't surprising here, but to hear this reaffirmed today is telling that the Mets are still actively in his market. And Bellinger is one of these guys who I have told you guys since the literal start of the offseason, there are very few player profiles I think are more enticing and more attractive for David Stearns and Steve Cohen than Cody Bellinger. Because the one commonality I've heard from Mets fans is, oh my God, Bellinger has such brutal road and home splits. Well, all things can be true at the same time. Bellinger did not have good splits on the road last year. What's also true is that he definitely took advantage of playing in Yankee Stadium and having the short porch. He also took advantage of playing at Yankee Stadium. Why? Because he's playing there for over half the season at least or so. So the notion that, oh, shame on a guy for having such greater numbers at home versus the road, I think is kind of a silly argument when you just bear in mind the simple facts that, of course, a batter is going to have more comfortability playing in one single ballpark where he knows the dimensions far greater than when he's just getting the samples dispersed all throughout the year in various ballparks, especially when teams have to play every other team in Major League Baseball at least a couple times every year now since the scheduling has changed a couple years ago. And instead of you playing, your division rivals 20 plus times a year, now it's broken up a bit more. And in doing so, you're naturally going to have guys that land in ballparks that they aren't as familiar with and don't have as much success in. So I think for Bellinger and for the Mets, it is clear as day that the home road splits reaches a moot point. That is not nearly a great concern that you, the fan base, have maybe suggested it has been at this point. And then we get into the obvious facts. In case you guys have not been following along, paying attention here on the platform, we've talked about Bellinger constantly for the past north of 2 months now. And Bellinger, what separates himself from every other player available in both the trade and free agent market, and yes, this is true, is his elite versatility as a defender. Bellinger was a plus defender in left, center, right, and first base last year, okay? Just that versatility alone, if you can sign on a reasonable contract, is so enticing for David Stearns and the Mets. Why? Because Bellinger's a guy that you can have starting on Monday at first base, but on Tuesday in left field. So if, say, the Mets go down a route or they bring in a Cody Bellinger, but still go after other feasible aspects of the lineup, like, I do think that isn't completely crazy to suggest the Mets try to sign both Bellinger and Bregman. But what it'll come down to for all these players, more than likely, is the term of their contracts. Because the Mets have an ability to spend big on high AV. However, they've shown a lack of ability or a lack of interest in going long-term on players after the age of 30. And that would hold true with Bellinger. If he has an inflated market at, say, 6-7 years, it's hard for me to see the Mets landing someone like him. I gotta see to believe it. How fitting we talk about Belly as Brazo and Alonso have no effing clue what they're doing there at first base. Then he takes Jesus Cabrera deep. Cabrera, the bum that he was as a southpaw in the Mets bullpen back in May of this year. That did not last too long before he was DFA'd and I believe picked up by the Cubs. That levels of success throughout the year. Not the Pirates too, if I'm not mistaken. Point stands, though, Bellinger has what you're looking for. He's a guy that knows what it takes to win in the big market. And I think the Mets love bringing in these former Yankee rentals because, again, we see them go through an adjustment period. And how do they handle New York before then staying in New York fairly long term? Saw it with Devin Williams, saw it with Juan Soto. We saw it with Clay Holmes in the sense of Clay was there for multiple years and had a lot of success. Now he's handled New York well in Flushing, Queens this time around. It would be no different if the Mets brought in Cody Bellinger after being traded from the Cubs a year prior, where the Cubs were essentially salary dumping him, and he had a fantastic year for the New York Yankees. 89 runs scored, 29 home runs, 98 RBIs, a 272, 334, 480 clip, good for a 5-WAR season, and a 25% above league average as a batter. Now, if you land Bellinger, you're not trying to land him to supplement all the power that you lost in Alonso, because you can't do that. But that's not what the Mets would be looking for. They would be looking to maximize their defensive versatility, a plus batting bat who would bat, of course, above league average for the Mets, even if he struggles a bit with his splits. And look at this tremendous play he did on Juan Soto. The immaculate reception that I call it. The Franco Harris catch of the MLB, if you will, by Cody Bellinger on that insane double play. Still pisses me off seeing that, but I would be happy if he's a Met again, now handling left while Soto's in right. I'm not complaining about that if that happens for 2026. Back-to-back years, the Mets pry away the 2 top outfield talents that hit the market from the Yankees. Not complaining, because those players are really good. And again, Bellinger brings attributes that no other player can provide. As good as Kyle Tucker is, and we'll talk more about Tucker in a second, he does not at all bring the defensive value nor the versatility that someone in Bellinger does. So adding Bellinger, let's go with a hypothetical. I was interacting with people on X earlier, and someone said something that I wholeheartedly agree with. No, I would be content if, say, the Mets traded for a Luis Robert type profile to handle center and then add Bellinger in left. And then what you do is you have Bellinger handle left, Robert in center, and then for the times that you have Bellinger not in the outfield and have him at first base, you of course have Polanco more so handling DH, which is more than fine. Polanco batted 74% of the time at DH last year for the Mariners. Tremendous switch hitter that we saw for the Mariners. Their most clutch hitter. I mean, I just had one of my editors, great friend of mine, shout out Tori, he said, I can't believe he pried Polanco away from us because he's the reason why we had our playoff run last year. So Mariners fans are still sour about losing Polanco, and I'm excited to see what he could do for this team. But if you have Polanco getting some reps at first base, but more at DH, allowing Bellinger to get more reps at first base. Then when Belly isn't in the outfield, what do? You, of course, will have Tyrone Taylor begin the year unless Carson Bench proves himself so much so that Bench actually cracks the roster out of camp. Now, it might not look like the sexiest team on paper, but I do think that there's a lot of good that can happen in a world where Robert, who's a massive bounce back candidate, which I've stated plenty, and it doesn't need to be him. The Mets are in the market for Brennan Doyle, who would be an elite defensive option for them in center, had an awesome offensive year in 2024 of a breakout, had a down 2025, but sadly him and his wife were expecting, and their baby passed away right before he or she was supposed to be born in April of this year. So Doyle had a down offensive year with that weighing on him right in the beginning of the year. So I think Brendan Doyle is a very sneaky option for the Mets if they want to go with him for center. But point is that if it's a Robert, if it's a Doyle, who have you, I don't think that's at all the wrong vision. I think that's more in line with the vision that Stearns will be doing. He wants to land one of these top players. He'd like to land another outfielder that can kind of be a placeholder without fully blocking Bench. And the only way to fully not block Bench is by landing Cody Bellinger over Kyle Tucker. If you still plan to land, again, a Luis Robert, a Brendan Doyle, someone along those lines that brings a lot of defensive and base running value, and a bat that has a lot more work it can be done, but should hopefully thrive in this kind of market with a deeper lineup with everything that you're getting. So point stands, Bellinger brings a level of versatility that no one else can touch. And while his offensive numbers may not jump off the board for you, he's in the 82nd percentile in batting run value, 69th in base running value, 91st there in fielding run value. Around the league average in most of these numbers in XWOBA, expected batting average, expected slugging, below league average in what we've seen average exit velocity, above league average in sweet spot percentage and squared up percentage, elite in his whiff and K percentage, so he has a absolutely fantastic eye of a strike zone, and 93rd percentile in outs above average, 91st in arm value, 83rd in arm strength, and 72nd in sprint speed. Bellinger's a guy that should hopefully be able to steal you north of between 20 and 30 bags a year, give you very strong defense in various positions, and open the floodgates and how creative David Stearns can go about this offseason with his roster building and really maximizing both plus bats, a lot of defensive versatility, and guys that can run the base as well. The Mets were not a fundamentally sound team this past year. And we joke about the Yankees and their lack of fundamentals, but we don't really have much to joke about on how much the Mets did not have things looking good fundamentally either. All the more reason to bring in guys that'll help in that regard. And for Bellinger, at an 814 OPS this past year, plus defender in all these accounts, again, can play all over the place, had an 881 OPS in 2023, dropped to 751 in his final year with the Cubs. I understand Bellinger has fluctuated with his offensive production over the years since he's dealt with an ailment, various ailments from his time with the Dodgers to then the Cubs to the Yankees. But the point stands. The value's there. He checks off a lot of what the Mets are looking for. And unlike Tucker, and unlike anyone else the Mets could land, Bellinger's unique ability to handle first and the outfield comfortably is what I really think the Mets love the idea on. What I think, and I believe the Mets don't love the idea on, and I know I'm not the only one who feels this way, is going beyond 5 years for Cody Bellinger. If Bellinger lands on a 6 or 7 year contract, I'll be surprised if it's the Mets. Not overly complaining if it's the Mets, because they can worry about the back end of that contract a couple years from now the way that they worried about Nimmo 2 years after he was already into his deal, or so, 2 or 3 for that matter. So if the Mets can part ways with Nimmo Nimmo's contract of 5 years remaining, I'm inclined to believe that they could handle losing Bellinger's remaining maybe 2 or 3 years of his contract if he really ages like milk after a couple years from now after signing a multi-year contract with, say, the New York Mets. But separate from Bellinger, again, he brings all the versatility that is what makes him so attractive as a player. And someone who can handle the New York market, has handled the big markets, a World Series champion, MVP caliber player. He checks off all those boxes. And he's a great clubhouse person as well. So again, if you want characters that know how to take to win, look no further than a guy like Bellinger. But if you really want to maximize the Mets' potential in landing a star-level player this offseason that will not bring you defensive versatility, but will most certainly be in the profile of a bat-first mentality, which Will Salmon of The Athletic stated in his piece yesterday that the Mets have more of an appetite for. They're in the market for more of a bat-first player. How ironic, after allowing a bat-first player in Alonso to walk, shows you how much they really did not want Alonso to return for right or wrong reason that has yet to be determined. But in the case of Kyle Tucker, again, is the profile that checks off the most boxes. If you're looking for an elite level talent, an elite level bat, and someone who could really change the dimension on how this outfield configuration looks. Because yes, he pales in comparison with his defensive value, 25th percentile in outs above average. Tucker's not a great defender, and if you land Tucker, you're more than likely shifting Soto to left field because Tucker is not a guy that's commonly playing left, and he's still a better defender than Soto, so you can't justify Soto staying in right. Soto has already made it clear that he'll be playing in left field for the World Baseball Classic for 2026 Team Dominican Republic. One does have to wonder, is it A, because Fernando Tatis is going to be handling right field in the WBC for DR as an elite defender that we've seen there? Or is it a little bit of B, that Soto is under the belief that the Mets are going all in on Kyle Tucker, which we know they believe to be a finalist of, and that is what would warrant why Soto is more comfortable handling left field? Whichever reason it might be, Tucker, again, is the most attractive piece if you're really trying to land an impact player right now to show that the Mets are legit, to show that the Mets are going to add the two best outfielders that have hit the market each of the past 2 years collectively now in the same outfield moving forward. Not having defensive value there, but you're having a lot of offensive value, and Tucker's been so well-rounded in his career. Again, 841 OPS this past year, 36% above league average as a batter, but he had a 993 OPS in his final year in Houston, 886 the year before that. Even if he sits more in the 850 OPS and peaking 900 and a long-term deal with the Mets on anywhere from, say, 7 to 10 years, you're still getting incredible value for someone who's entering just his age 29 season. In contrast, Brandon Nimmo, if I'm not mistaken, is entering at least his age 33 season. So you're landing someone that's at least 4 years plus younger that has a lot more to provide for you, especially with his arm value there that you guys see in the 83rd percentile. We see the offensive numbers, so much to love, so much eliteness there on the Baseball Savant page, and 90th and batting room value, and then on your way down. So Tucker is the most attractive, sexy, appealing piece for this Mets team if they're really trying to maximize a bat-first player that's in the free agent market and someone that will really have a lot of Mets fans buying in and not losing as much sleep over losing Alonso. As much as we love Pete, Tucker's a better overall player. There is no denying that whatsoever. He's been unbelievably steady and consistent with his performance as a player. Yes, he had a down second half this year, but he also played through injury that the Cubs were wary of, and they still let him play because, again, he was in a walk year, so whether it was going to help the Cubs and hurting his market or for Tucker, hurting his own market, he wanted to show his ability to stay out there and to try to play as much as he could while dealing with ailment. It still led to just a 136 game sample size instead of a 162, but the point stands, a lot of value came from Kyle Tucker in his one and done year for the Cubs. They're more than likely not going to bring him back. The Mets love the profile of Kyle Tucker. They love the idea of pairing him with Juan Soto in this outfield, because how can you not as a Mets fan? But again, as I said, the clear difference between Tucker and Bellinger has so much to do with that defensive versatility and how he can really change the dynamic of how the offensive lineup looks on a daily for Carlos Mendoza, getting very creative on matchups in a way where, again, if you bring in Tucker, you're stuck with that being your corner outfield for the foreseeable future until you, say, have Soto or Tucker getting more reps at DH as they get more into maybe the latter half of their career, if not sooner. So between Kyle Tucker and Cody Bellinger, I would love to hear from you guys. What player do you think makes more sense for the organization? I think Bellinger makes more sense not only for the money, for potentially the years, but also just, again, the value he brings to the team right away from a defensive and offensive standpoint. However, if you're shooting for the stars, which we know that the Mets are to a degree, that's why they're believed to be a finalist for Tucker. Should that be true, make sure it's not for lack of effort, because you have to separate yourself, right? Because if you land, say, a Cody Bellinger, then go ahead and bring in a Wilson Contreras via trade from the Cardinals. And then have Belly really play solely the outfield, okay? Then you could still have room for Benj because you can have Belly handle more center and have Benj more in left. That's a role that would make sense. You can have Tyrone Taylor gain some reps to start the year and center. It's fine if you want Belly in left, and then you shift Belly to center and have Benj in left because Benj is expected to handle more of the corner outfield as he develops. Not that Belly will be a star for you in the center field position, but he'll be comfortable and he'll know exactly what to do there in ways where you won't necessarily see that right away with Carson. The jury's still out. So you could go down the route where you try to land a Wilson Contreras, a Yandy Diaz, guys that bring a lot of offensive value at first for you. Contreras has a lot of defensive value too, but in doing so, it would lessen the likelihood as to why you would need a Bellinger profile who has versatility to play for space. So in that hypothetical, you could argue it would still make more sense to go after Kyle Tucker in the end, land Tucker, land one of those first base options via trade that I just mentioned, or sign a Ryan O'Hearn that has more defensive value and have him platoon things with Jorge Polanco, get a bit creative there because you're really maximizing your outfield with the talent that you have. Maybe you say, you know what, we're going to go ahead and sign Kyle Tucker and we're going to trade for Luis Robert. We're going to go bananas. Even if that means that Benj is a little blocked, because Robert, if he doesn't perform well, Benj is still a guy that could then kind of split time with him or eventually take the reins from his job as year goes on if Robert doesn't blossom and is more of that sub-700 OPS batter that we've seen over the past 2 years with the White Sox. I don't believe that'd be the case. I think he's a clear change of scenery candidate. I think he would thrive in a lineup deeper with the Mets and in a big market where they actually have an adamancy to try to win, is for a lack of effort at least. But jury's still out as to if that would actually happen. So point it stands. Tucker, Bellinger, I'd be more than happy with one of them. I'm not expecting both of them. Truthfully, I'll be a little surprised if Mets land either, just because they actually have to go out there and do it, okay? All I've seen so far is David Stearns be underwhelming, to say the least, in his negotiation process. And I know he overspent to land Jorge Polanco, and that's great. I'm really glad they got Polanco, who wants to be here, whose father resides in New York. Those are all great things. And you see Kyle Tucker just robbed right at the wall, Cody Bellinger. That's actually hilarious. Perfect timing. Oh my God. So again, take your pick. Belly or Tucker. If you can't have both, which one you think makes more sense to the Mets and why? Because if it ain't going to be Belly and if it ain't going to be Tucker, are the Mets going to have to around and just say, you know what, let's go ahead and land Alex Bregman? Because to what was said on MLB Network there, that we saw from Harold Reynolds, if I'm not mistaken, because I think he asked the question to Mark Feinstein, could they land both Bregman and Bellinger? On paper, they absolutely can. Yeah, and you can make the argument that they should, because if the Mets after around this offseason and got Bellinger on a contract not greater than 5 years, and were able to get Bregman on a similar contract, not past 5 years, maybe at most with a 6-year option, but high AAV, that's looking fantastic, because then you have a guy who can be your true star third baseman. Beatty then can be someone that you can use as a trade chip, and this is not a slight against Beatty at all. I just want to see the Mets put out the best team possible. Bregman is a clear upgrade over Beatty at their respective points in their careers right now. I'll expand on that in a second, but it's common sense. Bregman was the best player for Boston up until his injury this past year. When he came back, the bat slowed down a little bit, but he was still effective and productive for them. 18 home runs, 62 RBIs. But if you have Bregman at third, if you have Belly splitting time at first and the outfield, the Mets just like that. Yes, they lost Pete Alonso, and yes, it sucks to lose Edwin Diaz, but if you shore up the bullpen by making a big trade with the Padres that we hope to see, by signing some interesting guys in the free agent market, and again, by allocating the assets on the financial front the way you're supposed to, David Stearns and Steve Cohen, by landing these top talents, then we don't have much to complain about. If you shore up all these areas, do what you got to do in the rotation, etc., then we're going to feel amped up knowing that we have two guys that have been star-level talents in the league before, in Bellinger and Bregman, that still have a lot of immediate value, 2 World Series champions, 2 guys that have stepped up, that have been MVP caliber players throughout their career. Those are the kind of guys you want in this organization. You want winners. So then it would make Beatty more available via trade. And what do you do with Beatty? You have him as part of a package deal to land an ace caliber starter. It makes that much more sense, because Beatty does have a solid amount of trade value right now, especially in a role where you're trading for an ace caliber starter. That way, maybe you can lessen the prospect haul you'd have to give up, where you can trade Beatty when he doesn't have an immediate spot on the roster. It just makes too much sense, and that's why it more than likely isn't going to happen, sadly. But Bregman, again, is one of these profiles that when you look at a 273 average, 360 on base, 462 slug, 3.5 WAR, 25% above league average, a lot to like with him, again, as a player profile entering his age 32 season. Now, I know Bregman is not getting any younger, So you don't love the idea of him long-term. But Bregman also knows that he opted out of $40 million for the next couple years from the Red Sox in each of those years, when he probably should have settled with that because his market isn't materializing right now. And it probably will not materialize until both Tucker and Bellinger come off the board, where he's kind of that last man standing, not named Munetaka Murakami, as an attractive bat still available in the market. So for Bregman, a Scott Boras client, have to bear that in mind, as the Mets would be negotiating with him. I'm not sure how likely it is that the Mets would land someone like Bregman, but if he's a fallback option, I'm not complaining. Again, the Mets need to bring in guys that actually know how to win, bring plus bats, bring elite defense, and Bregman brings all those things, okay? 79 percentile in batting run value, a below-league average base runner, but that's okay. So was Soto, and did that matter this past year? No. 72nd in field run value, above-league average in XWOBA, league average in most of these stats, a little bit below-league average in bat speed and barrel, but however, this is what you love. 97th in squared up percentage, 95th in chase percentage, 92nd in whip percentage, 88th in K percentage, 73rd in walk percentage. Like Bellinger, Bregman too has an elite eye at the strike zone. And if the Mets landed both these guys, you're feeling, oh my God, it's like a kid in a candy shop because you're landing two elite level talents. And 83rd percentile in outs above average. He's just below league average in arm strength, but you're not worried about that because Bregman has not been a liability at the hot corner for like his entire career, or the past 6-7 years now. Again, a champion, separate from the Gene scandal. He won cleanly against the Phillies a couple years ago with the Astros, and sprint speed's low, but who cares? Again, we're not expecting Bregman to light the world on fire with his base running, but he brings all the attributes you're looking for in a win-now player. And again, he has defensive value. So this goes beyond just saying he's a bat-first profile, the way that Will Salmon said the Mets have an appetite for now. He checks off a lot of boxes for you. So if he's a fallback, if you lose out on Tucker and Belly, I can be content with that, but you still need to make sure that you get creative with who you add to the outfield then. Are you going to trade for someone that has a lot of value? Are you going to go after and land someone who's really established, or someone who's more on the up and up that has yet to hit their peak? What route will Stearns go then? So a lot of questions still need to be answered as we know at this point in time, but Bregman, Tucker, Bellinger goes without saying. If the Mets can land any of these players, most Mets fans, including myself, will really not be complaining. What we will complain about is if the team does not, and I repeat this, does not do enough around them. If you do not build in the rotation, if you do not build in the bullpen, it doesn't matter that if you just make big moves here, if you move marginally elsewhere. If you're truly in a win-now stage while focusing that you have a great farm, trying to take advantage of those assets, you actually have to go ahead and do it. And I believe that they are going to most certainly be doing exactly that, especially if it's with a team like the Padres or with someone else. So jury's still out as to who the Mets will be landing in this free agent market. We all impatiently await to see what decisions David Stearns is going to make. And speaking of David Stearns, be on the lookout because either later today or tomorrow, I will have a video dropping that'll be collaborated for WardyNYM and WardyMLB. I have a YouTube channel at WardyMLB presented by Stark Raving Sports. My buddy Mike does a fantastic job on the editing front. And we have a big topic regarding the Mets that I implore you guys to check out. It's a nice, thorough breakdown continued as to what is going on with the Mets, and are they making the right moves, or are they making every wrong move under the sun currently with David Stearns? So make sure you're on the lookout for that. It'll be posted on WardyMLB, but you will be notified if you are a WardyNYM subscriber, because like I said, I'll be using the collab feature. We'll show both channels, but it'll only technically be on one actual channel. You'll just be notified of it from both. So thank you guys again for watching. I really do appreciate it. Please continue to let me know all your thoughts, reactions, and of course analysis in the comments down below. From Belly to Tucker to Bregman, who are you more in favor of and why? Do you think that there is at all world where the Mets can land, say, a Bellinger and a Bregman? Do you think that they should continue to have their eyes set on the creme de la creme of this free agent class and Kyle Tucker before anyone else? Whatever your thoughts are, drop them down below. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, no matter what, folks, let's go Mets. I'll see you guys again real soon.